Today, that was fun. Next Friday, same time, same place. He will not.
She's gotta make these more efficient.
See, you don't even have to call.
Yeah.
We good? Okay,
Sat his car.
welcome to our work meeting tonight. It is Wednesday the 13th. A full house and a busy night, so we're gonna jump right in, try to get through some stuff. We start with item 1, council business. Any changes? I will say we did talk, there is,
Item 2.6, if it gets too late, I'm just gonna move that we continue that to another time. I put it at the end.
it's a, that's from us. Sorry.
Depends on how late it goes.
Yep, okay, thank you.
I had mentioned that to the mayor. It's the only thing we have standing in front of us.
Okay, future agenda items, anything?
Oh, no, if that's the only thing standing, we will go home.
I just have a quick one, and maybe Justin can chime in on this if you listen to the meeting. We talked a little bit about the water changes for the district representation. The proposal in their packet was that Riverton and Harriman would combine. I was confused about West Valley, why they had two, and that's been divided, so now West Valley is number 9. West Valley just has one as West Valley, and then number 9 that Corey's on right now is all of the water districts combined. There's 5 cities that get water from those different districts. So those 5 cities will have to decide who that one is. I said, well, good luck, because it was hard enough to decide when there was 3 cities, so now 5 cities will have to submit names. But that seems more equitable because those water districts now have more representation, but they can't have representation as a district, only as a city. And then, but I think as a council, I think that we should have conversations with Riverton and just understand how we want to submit names in the future, because it was harder when there was 3 of us. Now there'd just be 2. It is really, I would say to you that I hate to see it go every other time, because as you all know, when you sit on a board, it takes a cycle to really understand what's going on there. So, and I'm not suggesting that I'm gonna make decisions for any of it, but I just think that we should probably open up that dialogue with Riverton, just to see how we want to approach that in the future. Maybe we, each of us submit one name, or, you know what I mean? I don't know how we want to do that, but anyway, I think it's worth having the conversation with Riverton so that we know a good process going forward.
I've got some news. Yesterday I had an interview with Jordan Education Foundation, and I was appointed to their board. So I'm on that board now, starting as tomorrow.
Okay. 1.3, discussion of future citizen recognition. That may be a 1. This is, Wendy submitted it, it's, and rightfully so. This is for Tracy, who's the new chair of our trail committee. Like, once she took over our trails, nothing against, like, it just, I think she started working really well with our trails people, and just, they've been, how many trails have we, 2 now? 2 complete trails they built this
And
year?
they've done a lot of maintenance.
Tons of work.
With all volunteers.
Trail days every other week, I think, it feels like they're there. So we just wanted to recognize her for that. So any problem with that, any concern with that?
Not tonight, but in the future.
Yes, in the future. Yep. Wendy, are you okay reaching out to Tracy?
You bet.
Okay. Anything else on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 2.1, city status report. Trevor.
Hi, Mayor.
Welcome,
Council.
Trevor.
I do have, let's see, there's my folks have it as well. No real highlights, but if you had any questions, things that you wanted to discuss in the report, happy to answer them. Project updates came via our city engineer, and he's here to answer any questions on those as well. If not, I will happily get out of the way for everything else that we have to go.
Exciting tonight. Okay, any comments, questions on this tonight?
No, but I just sure appreciate seeing that, thank you.
I don't understand what other is under building permits. We have residential building permits, we have commercial building permits, then we have other building permits.
Basements.
Catherine can respond.
Yeah, likely those are
Solar.
basement, solar, mechanical, furnaces, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Trevor, appreciate your work on this, everybody who goes into this. Okay, 2.2, discussion regarding adoption process for public infrastructure district governing documents for Panorama and Wasatch South Hills.
Okay.
Like,
So, I have a packet that I've handed out to everyone. So, please keep that handy. This item will be coming back to the council meeting on December 11th. And so, this packet will be helpful as you prepare for that. So, just some public information. The Public Infrastructure District, or PID, is was approved by the legislature for developers to be able to set up a taxing district for their developments, to generate revenue, to help them enter the municipal bond market, to finance infrastructure improvements. The improvements must be public, and everybody within the taxing area has to give consent to be part of the district, every property owner. So, it's a brief overview of it. I think that's the gist of what they're for. And for this one, this PID project location is shown here. It's the Panorama, Rosecrest, and South Hills area. Also, we're excluding this little piece of the Panorama project. So, as you can see, the PID area shown here. We did a PID for Olympia a little while ago. And if you remember, they had smaller districts, kind of like being proposed here. They have the smaller districts, and then when they're ready to activate, to enter the bond market for the infrastructure improvements, they can do an amendment and take that PID number 1 and cover the area they need to, and then make that part of the taxing area. So that's the idea of this one, is to have essentially 5 opportunities to amend and go out, amend the PID plat and go out and generate tax to revenue for these projects.
Can I ask kind of a weird question right now? Because those are right there, and there's a multitude of property owners on this, does that affect it? Because it has to be, is it just because they're all part of the whole development, and they're all part of all the PIDs, even though the PIDs are not on their land
So
initially?
they've had to consent to be, as inside of this, there's a PID petition. And so the property owners for only this area have to consent for this one. But as they expand, they'll have to do a final local zoning plat, and they'll have to be a signature on that plat.
Okay,
So
so
they'll
then
have to
that's when
consent
they
to that
join
one.
in, okay.
Great question. So this total area, the annexation area, at the end of the day, should be a little bit over, or right around 1,100 acres. In the document, they plan on doing approximately $55 million infrastructure costs, 5 mils proposed levy, tax levy on this. They also leave the door open in the governing document for assessments or other fees. As you remember, Olympia also has does assessments. And then the maximum term levy is 40 years, most in the document.
That's a max of 5 mils, right? Of what they're proposing.
They could do less.
and Olympia was 4?
4.5.
They came back and did something.
I think they're,
But they're doing a contract fee right now. I don't know if they implemented the
Yeah, I'm trying to remember I don't know what they set their mill levy
The
at.
auto mall is 10. And that's the max that we allow for our policy. So this is the initial plat. Just for example, to zoom in on those districts shown here. So this would be infrastructure district 1. And then they would go and amend this and the amended infrastructure district 1 and put it over the area. And I would state it requires 100% approval, or approval from 100% of surface property owners. So in this booklet, we'll kind of go through this. The tab number 1 is the letter of intent. So the letter of intent went to the Community Development Committee. And then after that, we brought it to council, and council said, we're okay, keep progressing with the governing document. That was about a year ago. And so tab 2 has the scoring sheet for the letter of intent, which will look very familiar with the scoring sheet for the governing document. Tab 3 is the petition. That's one of the main requirements to kick off the governing document and proceedings. So you can see that we have the petitioners, PAI, and Wasatch, or Soleil Hills. The boundaries listed in the map that you just saw. And then tab 4 is the governing document as proposed. And so it'll be the same governing document for both PIDs. We'll just go through and change, select Panorama or Soleil Hills. And so the last tab, tab 5, is this scoring sheet. I was just gonna go through each one of these items. Not worried about the $1,000 fee. I don't think we've sent an invoice yet, so that's they'll be able to pay that. I'm not worried about it. The items are met for item 2 and item 2.1. Item 2.1, it talks about the public benefit generally, so if you're in agreement with that being satisfying that requirement, great. From our analysis, it did. Item 2.2, the PID policy requires a little bit more information about densities and phasing. That information is included in the MDA, but it's not in the governing document. So we can either reference the MDA or we can use the exhibits in the MDA and put them into the governing document, however the council will proceed on that. But I'll already waive the requirement because it is a policy, but everything scored here was based on the adopted policy by the council. 2.3, the map and infrastructure and facilities, we received a list from each of the developments, which is shown up here on the board. And these are the projects that are included, but the state statute doesn't require all of the information that our policy does. And so if we want more information, the policy requires a detailed list, a map, and then broken into line items for quantities and unit costs for each item per project. Going down to 2.5, the phasing plan. Again, it wasn't included in the governing document, but it is, the village plan is included in the MDA. So we can either reference the MDA, take those exhibits, put them in the governing document. The ongoing maintenance, there is a statement about the PID will not perform operations or maintenance, but there's also some discussion about property managed by the HOA, some areas in the governing document. So my recommendation is if we have any public improvements that are gonna be maintained by an HOA, that we have a maintenance agreement put in place for those, so you can note that in the governing document. For the financial information, we don't have a pro forma and a financial plan in the governing document, but it was included in the LOI. So I don't know if it needs to be updated and brought into the governing document. There was a lot more information regarding the financials in the LOI, which was done a while ago, so things have changed since then. The comparison to the mill levy for similar taxing entities wasn't provided. We know it, so that's one that as the council chooses, it's an easy statement to put into the governing document. It just wasn't in there. The operating budget for the first 3 years was not in the governing doc. Any other forms of public financing? So this one, they mentioned that there are other forms out there and they may chase them. So this one could be met, but it didn't specifically say anything, so I marked it on the not met. And then the last one, the outline of the reporting requirements. These are the annual reporting requirements that we've required in our policy to go out to all the residents within the PID. They've outlined that very well in the governing document. So that's the summary of the PID. So we're just looking for direction from the council. If we have things we need to change, we need to get them changed, because the future process on this item is we require a 14-day public notice. So we'll have to have that out the week of Thanksgiving, before Thanksgiving. to hit the December 11th city council meeting for this one to be on that meeting for approval. And then, so yeah, these are the next steps, address comments and have the public hearing. And for a little additional information, which was requested in the last meeting, we have other city obligations in this area. This is the Rose Crest reimbursement agreements. And so these are the outstanding reimbursement agreements that have been executed. We're sitting on, have total obligations and dates that these were executed. The 3 impact fee items and the CDA participation agreement. The proposal to bring to you on December 11th, the agreements have been drafted and being reviewed by legal right now. And is to do 2 new agreements. They would entirely replace these old agreements. One would be an impact fee reimbursement agreement, the other one would be a CDA participation agreement. We verified the total cost of just shy of 33 million. We've already reimbursed 9.8 million, which leaves an outstanding obligation of $23,090,950. So you can see the impact fees, we won't come close to generating that much impact fee, especially with the PID. So we looked at the CDA will have to cover the deficit. Looking at it, Kyle and I have worked with Zions Bank to project out what the CDA should generate. And it's anticipated that the CDA will cover the deficit by 2038, with an additional about $5 million buffer, and that's a conservative estimate on everything. It will require the CDA to be built out by that time. I can't remember if it's 100% built out, Kyle, but it'll require
Substantially built out, yeah.
substantially built out. Remember, loss actions, plots 35, 39 are in CDA. The Williamson property, which is the pond that I said wasn't included in the CDA, or in the PID, is in CDA. So they'll pay impact fees, so they'll bring up this amount a little bit closer to where it needs to be. But yeah, it does look like the CDA impact fees are going to cover with some surety that we'll have a little bit extra at the end. If it goes as planned. And this would close out all these outstanding obligations and clarify everything. Is there anything else, Kyle, you wanna add on that one? You covered everything. So that was just some extra information that isn't really related to the PID, but goes hand in hand with the PID and was requested last time, so. So our request is, are there any items, as you looked through the governing document and the scoring sheet, that you have any heartburn over or direction you wanna give us on the items that the requirements were on that?
I know most of the items not met things seem like could be easily corrected referencing the MDA.
We have the info already.
Yeah, I mean, so for those, I don't really have any concerns.
Do you want them just to reference the NDA?
Yes, I think that's probably the easiest way, just, right? I mean.
Yeah, I think that'd be pretty easy.
But the only ones that I think are worthy of some further conversation here would be items 2.3, 2.4, and then possibly 3.6, although I don't really have much concern about that.
I'll put those back up, Blake.
Do they know what 2.3 is? You don't know? That's the hard part, right?
Yeah, on some of it, right?
We kinda have this, but yeah, it's. I guess the question is, if they put it in the governing document, does it fully obligate them to do every single item? Or are they only required to do what they can go out and get financing for? And then, that's,
Then
I don't know
estimated
if there's
construction
any-
cost, that's gonna change from today or 10 years.
so.
Part of the reason that we have this in our policy as opposed to what state statute says is that we felt that there were some potential opportunities for, I don't wanna say this,
Non-fulfillment.
No, just some waste and maybe some abuse and some personal enrichment through the use of these public fees, right? And that, we wanted to make sure that there weren't going to be, public infrastructure taxes used to pay management fees to the to the company who's overseeing the construction, if it's themselves, right? We didn't want it to be used to pay for, I can't remember, extra large contingencies or things that were out of line, And so we wanted to make sure that it was being used to fund public infrastructure, not be a profit center for anyone else. And so that's why we wanted the cost breakdowns, so that we could analyze that. Now, it's a little tough to do that when you're talking about projects that are 20, 30, years out, that are,
I wonder if you would wanna do that with a third party or consultant firm or somebody else rather than the land developer itself, right? Or even our in-house engineering. It's all performance, they've got all the data. We know what a mile of road costs, right?
It'd be a lot easier to just list the projects and what phase they would come in.
True, yeah.
And put some description on the phase 1, 2, and 3, like 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus or something.
It seems when last time we did this, the main concern was they put in, their own management fees, or they had these other fees in there that council's like, well, wait a second, you don't get to add an extra 5%. You're doing the project, we're not paying you, it wasn't even for, it was just a management fee that was on top.
Yeah. That's what it meant.
Steve, we wouldn't be putting in any sort of development fee or any of that, so there would be no enrichment from that perspective or any at all. But that's why there's a governing document for this, that's why there's a formal process to be reimbursed for some of the expenditures. It's almost like having a construction loan where you submit a draw, and the draw has to be gone through and approved, and that only then you get the cash to be able to reimburse yourself for the cash outlay.
I think in the last one, we just put in there, they couldn't use it for those specific types of soft costs.
And I guess that would be the phrasing that I would like to see.
There's language there.
Is something about that too.
It wasn't designed, but it was specific, I'm trying to remember which one came, but it was specifically like this management fee. And
Yeah.
So section
we're not
8I,
paying you a management fee.
section 8I does have that initially they'll take $250,000 for setting up the district and all their costs.
Right, those are legitimate.
And then $50,000
Sure.
every year to run the organization.
But that's the pit, this was, if I
This
remember,
was-
I can't remember if it was
It's
in,
for a project.
it was one of the other pits we've approved, and they had
It
in
was
their
in the project
management
line,
fee
those.
in part of their projects, and we said,
It was part of
yeah,
the
we're not
project.
gonna do that.
So when you go to PID funding, this might be, don't you have to submit the amount of projects or, hey, we need $200 million for this PID?
You are, right, you're going out to a bond, and we should understand, it's PID, it's a public entity, it's got all these rules, the state auditor
Yeah.
is going to be looking at it, and so the city's out of it, we just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting something in there that would come back later and say, why'd you put that in there? I think we could, if that's a concern, we could go back and look at how we worded that. Like I said, I remember it wasn't designed, but there was one that said a management fee.
management fee.
To like manage the whole project. We're
Exactly.
like, I don't know about that, that's what it was.
And I think that's, look, there's one time that this council has a oversight of what's going on, right? And I think we have an obligation as we're setting up a taxing district,
Exactly.
right?
That we will not have.
Yeah, to make sure that we're trying to put proper controls and constraints over this while allowing it to function the way it's supposed to function too, right?
Yeah, always.
And so that's why I'm bringing the issue up, is not to jam anybody up or to complicate the issue, but to do what I think is our responsibility as elected officials to make sure that those tax dollars are being optimized in their utility, right? And so
Do we
that's,
get any, once these districts are put in this geolocation, when they expand that district, do we have any other input as council? Once we approve it, it's done.
Yep.
Done.
yeah,
They just bring in a.
That's always,
Yeah.
initially when they first came out with, because I said that 100 times, it felt like taxation without representation. and I always question the constitutionality of it, right? And it's gone through that vetting process at the legislature and stuff like that, but
But this is the representation moment, yeah.
Exactly, but this is a representation moment, and I appreciate someone saying, well, we're not gonna do that, but what happens if you got hit by a bus tomorrow and the next guy wanted to do it? You know what I mean? I just think that we just have to be careful not to, because we are the representatives at this time and it's our responsibility.
So I think we just need language in there, just stipulating that.
Not that I
And
think you
if
should
that's
get
in
hit by
the,
a bus
that
tomorrow.
might be in the governing document, but.
That's where we
Yeah.
put it, we'll have to just look at how we, cause I recall the conversation very specifically. I just don't remember what language
Yeah.
we put in there.
And look, it's not. Never mind. That's a different conversation.
I think we've got.
So no
But
cost.
I think if we can make sure that we're, putting language is just controlling some of the potential areas where, that we had concerns about potential, you know, waste or abuse with it, you know, then I think that should cover it.
Other concerns on this list then?
No, because waste or abuse can be intended or unintended, and it's just
That's right,
better to-
either way, yeah.
Okay.
So, is this project list okay, or do you want a map? Would you prefer a map or just a list? The lists are kind of different. One is a little more detailed in certain things, and the other one is more general. This one's a lot easier to, the one on the left, panorama.
Sorry, where's that in our packet?
I don't think it's in there.
I think it'd be awesome to have,
It wasn't included, so I requested this one after.
I think it'd be awesome to have like the project list overlaid on the map, like Backbone Road A is here, B here.
Phasing is important, so I don't mind pointing to the end. But between now and the time we approve this, we may want to
How many changes, yeah?
include a specific list here.
Yeah.
So I can have each developer, if that list is okay for panorama, we just have South Hills do a similar list.
Well, we may want, like I said, a map or something that
Should a
shows
map to go along with
the phasing so that we understand.
the project list with a map that shows phasing. As an example to the.
I would guess it's probably estimated phasing, but at
Yeah.
least relative phasing, that this one goes before this one, so that we don't get, stuff like
I didn't track all of it, there were a couple side conversations, but I think I got the gist.
Alrighty, well, I think that gives me enough information to move forward. We'll bring this back to the council on December 11th.
I did have one question though, that it's never occurred to me before in reference to the small PIDs being expanded later. Is there a potential that the mill levy rate would be different in each subsequent
Potential.
PID?
It could be.
And so that, you know, these neighbors will be paying one mill levy rate, these neighbors will be paying a different mill levy rate over a whole thing, and that's okay, but I just never considered that before, as I thought it was gonna be the same across the board, but it may not be. Or they may just max it out because that gives them the most infrastructure.
Steve, in my estimation, the mill levy would remain the same and flat throughout the entire state, but the value of each home dictates what that end amount is going to be,
Yeah,
right? So the person who's got $1.5 million or $1.5 million house is gonna pay a lot more in that 5 mil levies than a person who is in a $600,000.
right.
And I've not known people too often that have the opportunity to get 0.5, but they say, heck, we'll go with 0.2.
Right. Well, there's no way that the mill levy is gonna cover all the infrastructure costs, right? So
Exactly.
I think it's kind of fait accompli that they're gonna,
Yeah.
you know, max that out
Hypothetically.
to get as much revenue as they can to offset
Yeah.
the out-of-pocket costs for the infrastructure, so.
But hypothetically, absolutely right.
But, again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? This is,
Some
we've
people-
talked about this, right? This
Some
is,
people face special assessment districts
Yep.
that are right next to each other.
this is no different than if it's a impact fee or a
Yeah.
special assessment district or just a tax or whatever. It's the same way, public pays for public infrastructure, that's how it works, so.
Okay, appreciate it. Let's go to 2.3, discuss financial impact of hiring additional police officers. Kyle.
to deal with likes of you.
You need a lot more.
also got Chief Carr here, Deputy Chief Stromberg and Commander Adams are also here as we go through this discussion. So tonight I just wanted to focus on what if we were to hire additional officers, what financial impacts does that have? What's the initial costs? What's the ongoing costs and so forth? So first, I just wanted to start back in last August of 23, when the HCSEA board approved a tax increase. The board at that time restricted the overall increase to certain items. So one was a vehicle replacement fund, so that was 8.7% of the increase. So finance has been transferring that into a capital equipment fund, so those funds are being preserved for future police vehicle replacements. Next was officers to meet demand, so that was 2.4% of the increase, or about $192,000. And then a mental health specialist, which was 1.1% of that, which was $88,220. So looking between the 2 years, so this was approved last fiscal year. I'm including this fiscal year even though we haven't collected all of the tax yet. We should collect all the tax, so I did include it in these numbers. So we've collected about 1.4 million for vehicle replacements. We have about 385,000 for officers, and then 176,000 for the mental health specialist. So that's 2 years worth of those restricted funds.
That's total salary burden in the 88,000, right? It includes benefits.
Right, however, that was at the time of the tax increase, so it may have shifted a little bit, which for the health specialist, I didn't do an analysis of what the new number is. But it probably has gone up a little bit from that, but I just have to look. Focusing just on a new officer, salary and benefits, and that is full burden with benefits, retirement, et cetera, is about 155,000. Operating costs, so that includes equipment, training, subscriptions and that type, is about 25,000. And then a vehicle would be about 82,500. So first year cost for a new officer is about 262,000.
Are we taking fuel into account on that number?
This number doesn't include fuel because with the new vehicles we've gotten, they're more efficient and the current fuel budget has been sufficient to cover. So the police department didn't recommend an increase right now. But that would need to be factored in future years.
We're running about
Going fuel
20% on fuel budget right now, so we should be around 34, so it's tracking pretty good for it.
That's good.
Look, another restriction that was put into place was what's called new growth funds, and I know you as a council know this, but in case anyone's watching, how property tax works in the state is we receive the exact same amount of property tax revenue as the prior year plus any new growth for the year. The council requested that new growth portion be restricted and kept held aside for new growth expenses. So we're not using that new growth to cover costs for existing officers or existing operating costs. Using Trevor, our management analyst, he did a growth projection over 10 years. That was part of the 10-year model we had brought couple council meetings ago. We're projecting over 10 years we'll have 4.1 million of new growth money coming in. Going back to that officer, because that cost was just for year one of the officer, we are anticipating, of course, that operating costs will increase, salaries will increase as the officer moves through the step plan, there's COLA increases and so forth. So that for one officer over 10 years is about $187,000 or about $21,000 a year. So that's just what we're anticipating the cost to increase an average over the next 10 years.
That's gonna be per officer.
Right, right. Next, there's multiple scenarios on how that could be covered.
So
Oh, go ahead.
that is 187,000 over the 10 years, right?
Right,
Okay.
With year one being zero.
yeah, that's why it's
Okay,
not
got it.
18,000.
We're not expecting the salary to double in 10 years.
No, it shouldn't, I mean,
The
within this,
accumulated
you've got
cost over the 10 years of inflation is the 187. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
you've got your vehicles, all your equipment, all that stuff has been
Sure.
going up pretty regularly.
So does these numbers are including the vehicle costs? And then are we also allocating some percentage towards the vehicle replacement fund, or is it all tied into this?
The 21 does not include vehicle replacement.
That's in that.
That's another.
But we have that in
We-
that
we
other
separate
fund.
Another
Yeah.
bucket.
That one
So-
should be.
My only follow-up question on that is that just looking at the pay scale or that's including an inflation?
So this was super simplistic. It was looking at the model Trevor had created. It was an average of about 5% a year for all categories. I just took that 5% and carried it out for 10 years. So we didn't delve down to a micro level, looking at, okay, this person's at step 8 right now, they will be at step 10,
This is
they're gonna
an
be topped out.
average.
It's not merit and then, so it's
Cause
just.
we won't know what step the officer will be brought into.
I
So
just
that,
wanna know like
right.
the methodology,
Right.
so I can.
this was super simplistic. Then, just looking, this is a holistic view of what restricted funds we do have available and some that aren't restricted. So what, the top one is what the HCC fund has in fund balance. So it's currently at, as of the end of fiscal year 24, so this is of June 30th last year, we have about 1.25 million. Of that, 970 isn't restricted due to the new officer mental health specialist restrictions. So that is, if you wanted to go and spend that, you would have that available because it doesn't have those restrictions on it. Then I split out the tax increase from the prior year for the new officers. We have 2 years of funding sitting there. Same with the mental health specialist, and then that new growth money we're anticipating for fiscal year 25. Because fiscal year 24 is year zero, because that's when the tax increase was put into place. So looking at adding up just those restricted, so not including the fund balance, that leaves 831,000 roughly. If we subtract out that mental health specialist, that's about 655,000. Then looking at if the city was to hire one officer, what would be left in that restricted balance? That'd be about 392,000 and change. And then if 2 officers were hired at the same time, the balance would be about 130,500. With that, that's my presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions or any discussion you wanna have on it.
That's the 262.
If we hire 2 officers, do we have enough money to pay them the next year, the following year? Is it continued off that tax increase? So it's the same funds coming in?
No, you would.
For the base for the salary in year 1 that exists, but remember, you don't get an inflationary increase.
So it would cover the year 1, but any inflation isn't covered.
So this is great info, I don't really have any other questions for you apart from the one. But going forward, I would suggest we have an actual future agenda item, whatever, it makes sense to talk about the actual budget planning, right? What kind of offers, we had a few other conversations, I think we need to maybe have a transparent conversation for the public of, right, if we're gonna hire them, are they going to be, for what purposes, right? And then further discuss our budgeting plan going forward, right? We need to make adjustments. This was an initial run at basically a basic budgeting principle of separating money for separate purposes, right? Which now gives us the ability to look at this. Now we have some money to work with, kind of, right? So how do we want to apply that? But then the part that we haven't addressed is this just set aside some funds, some dollar amounts for a few specific projects, if you will, and we left the inflation part separate. So we need to really address a full plan on what our staffing plan is going forward, how to apply these funds. And those needs change over time, but then also our plan to address the inflation part. So we can't let that go too far, right? So we've gone 1 year of the inflation part that's not addressed. We need to plan on what what that plan is going to be for inflation. If we're going to do an every other year inflationary increase, an annual increase, whatever that is, we need to start having that conversation.
Is that as council or as a board? As a board, right?
Same.
Well-
You would probably be sitting as the HCC board,
When we make the decision, but that can be done in a work.
but you're the same, put on your different hat.
Right.
Okay. What's the timeliness? Do we have that?
Well, we have some competing demands, right, and we've talked about those. What is our peak hours? Originally, and when we had this conversation a little less than a year ago, the competing demands weren't like they are today. Our concern was how are we gonna meet peaking time? What does peaking time look like? We know a lot more about that now, right? We know that one officer for now can handle that peaking process, right? The competing demand we have is the accelerated complex criminal activity we're experiencing. And that is where we need to be kind of hyper-focused right now. And when I mentioned accelerating, I mean that is unchecked.
Yeah.
We do not have a focus on that right now. We have our patrol, we have our detectives, we don't have a focus like most departments do on that element because that element didn't exist very long ago, right? That was one of the things when I said we were fortunate as a city, we were fortunate. And then we became lucky and that ran out too. So here we sit, and if anything is important, it's that right now. And we can talk a little bit more in depth about what exactly that is, but it would probably be under security, based on some of the needs that we would experience in both staffing it and addressing it. So to answer your question, I don't know if that did entirely,
Well,
but
it
our
wasn't,
competing
I didn't have a
demands
question, I just
have shifted just a
kind of
little
made a
bit.
statement that we need to have that discussion.
And one of the things you wanna be careful with is voting in a budget that says these are the people that'll be in these positions, cause you kind of then tie the hands of the administrator to say, okay, if I need to move people around, now do I have to go back and get a vote? So what we come looking for is the allocation for the manpower, and then brief you on how that's being deployed.
For the FTEs.
Yeah. But, yeah, competing demands is our new problem, right, that we didn't have 6 months ago.
And there's new variables on your 460s, right, with
There is,
with the implementation of some of the AI systems for efficiency things and,
Yep.
you know, so there's,
and to visit a little bit about that, the efficiencies that we set out to get did involve AI, and that's gonna be a $50,000 bill, right? Per year for our officers, but we also see that that's creating more than a 50% time savings in report writing, which is better than a third of their day. So when you start talking about all those numbers, we are freeing up some assets in patrol.
Yeah.
However, we're receiving greater call volumes all the time. So we're cutting through all the efficiencies we possibly can, AI being probably one of the greatest ones we'll experience. We last year cut and saved to try and put money back in the fund balance. And I think, what did we come up with? Just short of
It was less than $1 million, but
It's just short of $1 million. And we hustled because we want that fund balance growth, right? And we cut down to the bone, probably in some cases to our own detriment right now. So, we're looking at how to identify any more efficiencies. To be honest with you, as a lean police department, you're at 42 sworn officers, including me. Todd, when I put him in as special deputy, so, which hasn't been helpful at all. So,
I'm just a chauffeur.
Right? So, you know, at the end of the day, we're gonna have to look at these things and say, did we meet our efficiencies? I think we did. We cut to try and add to the fund balance because we wanted to meet that 2-month operating. So we've done those things. Now really the question is, do we have enough man hours to cover our issues that we're experiencing? And we're experiencing them, and again, we'll talk about this later, at a greater rate and a more concerning rate right now.
So I think our plan right now is we're bringing a budget amendment for a bunch of things next meeting. Some of the wrap up was to include at least one of these officers. So we can talk a little bit about how that will be used, if not two. But we do need to talk about the inflationary piece and how we're gonna deal with those going forward, but
I think part of the thing is when we voted for that tax increase in the HCC, we specifically identified the hiring of another officer. I don't have any problem with allocating those funds to make sure that's being done. Like, if that's what we need to do, that's what it was for. The
telling
money's
us
there,
that
let's go,
that
pull the
need
trigger,
is
you know?
there for it, right? And it
Well-
might be different than the metrics we were talking about, right? But
Well,
that's
we
what I
did
mean.
add the one, as you'll recall, the geography of the city, right, which is a difficult thing to
Got it.
address here in Harriman. And we have met that and we're exceeding it by 2 or 3%. Now, our goal was always to come to you before that happened. At 50%, when we're almost to our goal, we are now in excess of that. And that's on a priority one call basis. So those are the most concerning ones, right? If we can't meet our priority one calls and our goal is 60% in 6 minutes, we're past that.
Do we generate revenue when we put on courses such as motors or those other
No, and if we did, it would be
loss of
$500 or something like that, right? The ability of a police department to generate revenues concerns me a little bit. And I would stay clear of all of that and
That's
The
what
big, big sale, I'm just saying.
Well, and
pass the boot around or something like that, but yeah.
But to the public that's watching, we do not get money from tickets.
Yeah.
So we're funded in a very transparent way that does not include that. A little amount of money that comes back on a ticket goes to the city general fund, not to the police department. So, just to be clear on all of that, but,
Still doesn't cover the cost.
yeah, our,
Almost
probably our
uniform,
biggest revenue here is the JSD repayment for SROs,
40%.
which is another conversation.
That,
Yeah.
you're just recovering costs though, you're
Yeah,
really not
yeah,
making
yeah,
money.
yeah. I
Because
mean,
they're just supplementing
it's
the
on a
officers.
revenue line, but it's an offset of 40.
It's about 40%, 45% of the cost.
Um, Okay, and we'll get to school security tonight, by the way, in a different setting.
That'll be another truth and taxation hearing coming up.
But it's kind of finishing the rest of the plan.
Yeah. Which is, I still like, we've accomplished what we wanted, we're moving in the right direction, I like it.
And there's some projection to it, right? You can see what things cost
We
us
can
in the
actually
long
plan.
term.
We're not just reacting and saying, okay, we need more money.
And one of the things that probably wasn't a focus in the past was cops cost more every year, right? And we've now identified what that is, because we didn't know that before, how fast that market grew. Now that we've identified that, we can do some projection to that. And having, Trevor help us with those kind of things, and Kyle's been super important to say, you can't not afford your police. You just have to figure out how to afford your police, right? It's one of those things.
If we can be a little bit forward-looking.
Yep.
Right, then.
Plan for it.
Data's helping us make better decisions.
So we can't say we can't afford you.
It's data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our job should
Public safety, it is expensive.
No kidding.
Okay, appreciate it, everybody. Kyle, thank you. 2.4, update and design alternatives for 6,000 West. Roadway widening, phase 1, price.
Alright, so yeah, we are currently in the middle of a design for a future roadway project.
This is just, even that we're talking about it. I know it might not even, but just that we're talking.
There is a
So-
small space of 6,000 that has new tar on it, I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just, so,
That's all getting torn up too.
it's really quick, it's like a second worth of it.
so yeah, this is 6,000 West, also known as Pioneer Street. Kind of a little background of the area. So what we're talking today is about phase 1, but this project needs to be completed in 2 phases. So cemetery north is to the right, that's what this little arrow is showing. Cemetery's here at the north end. And then Main Street is at the bottom end here, the south end or the left side here. Harriman Boulevard's on the north end here. So today we'll be discussing phase 1, which has been put into the budget and does have funds committed towards design and construction. And so that's about a total of 3.5 million. Now it gets a little bit complicated because there's traffic or general fund, water impact fee fund, and storm drain impact fee fund that would all kind of tie into this. Our design, we're not gonna probably use all of our design funds, so it would roll over into construction funds. But simply, we'll have about 3.5 million for the project. It could be up and down a little bit.
And we should say this, there's still a chance this is sliding and moving as we're trying to come back in and
Right.
see where our revenues are ending up, so.
And then for phase 2, so the middle part, this is Silver Sky Drive, so our community garden's kind of just right here. There's a church right there, kind of as the dividing line between phase 1 and phase 2. And yeah, as mentioned, so phase 2 is not in the budget yet. It is in our CIP for fiscal year 27, but that subject, as Nathan said, to move around as priorities change or as funds are limited. So yeah, today we'll be talking about phase one, and we're kind of giving you an update, but more soliciting feedback on how we want the road to look as we get into final design. And so this will be kind of an a la carte menu of 30 options here that we're considering and want to get feedback on. We do have a recommendation, but there's maybe things that we haven't considered and that are priorities for the council that may have not been considered. So these are the three main questions. Number one, what cross-section or width of the road should we use? Number two, how should we deal with the park strips? And that's two parts. Who maintains them, and who installs them? And then number three is what we do with the existing power out there, power poles that are aerial. So let's jump into that. So the first one is cross-section, like we said. So there's three options we've kind of considered and laid out here. Option one is our recommendation, but option two is actually our city standard, our normal. The difference between option one and option two is just the park strips are 1 foot smaller. So instead of a 5 foot park strip on each side, you have a 4 foot park strip on each side. The biggest reason for this is that we run into several conflicts when we go to the option two with private irrigation structures, but also some property owner fences that would be pretty impactful to certain property owners.
I don't want to ever touch a fence again.
And so this has some benefit in the fact that we bring it, the whole right of way comes in a foot on each side, right? Because you have one on each on the park strip coming in. The biggest pro is like I said, we wouldn't have to be relocating and reinstalling a private irrigation system. Now, the private irrigation companies we've worked with have been great, but it adds an element of risk to the project that whenever you're building someone else's product, that they may have concerns. Additionally, the irrigation season, we would have to have the construction being done kind of the winter time before April, once the irrigation season, to not impact the property owners that have those irrigation rights. So that's probably the biggest reason why we recommend option one. There is obviously the obvious con that you lose a little bit of that park strip buffer. Trees like as much buffer as they can, and so going from 5 to 4, although we believe the trees could survive, there is a little bit less likelihood that they grow well. And so additionally, this is kind of an added benefit. A lot of this corridor, we've already gotten the 66-foot right-of-way from subdivisions or other kind of reasons. And so in those areas, that allows us to actually have a foot buffer behind the sidewalk before we hit a neighboring property. So fence or whatever it is gives us a little bit of buffer on the project to be able to have that foot buffer on the back of the sidewalk. And then option 3 is similar to what was just installed on 7300 West, which is the park strips are actually eliminated and the sidewalk is brought up right up to the curb. We do extend the sidewalk to 6 feet because there's the lack of the park strip buffer between the pedestrians and the traffic. But a big con that we've heard from residents of 7300 West is you can see here it goes to the mountable curb to meet ADA requirements. We can't tilt this sidewalk down towards like a drive approach would in the park strip. And so because of that, we have to go with a mountable curb. There is options that you can bump the sidewalk out at every driveway and then kind of go around and have this drive approach, but at that point, you're not really saving any more money, time, impact to property owners. So those are our 3 options we're discussing.
Everyone parks on the sidewalk.
Yes, that is a big con.
You roll up on the
You
road
lose a
curb,
lot of
park
the
on the
aesthetics and the buffer, right, from the trees, the landscaping. It is an option and it does reduce the cost and it does reduce the impact as far as how much the construction impacts the yards when we tie back into the yards. But there's also a significant concern about those mountable curbs and the lack of a buffer, so. Yeah, any questions on the cross sections here or thoughts?
Does option one eliminate the majority of those right-of-way issues?
Yeah, it does. I will say the right of way, so you can see in the staff report, I think it eliminates 2 parcels we don't have to engage and acquire property from. We're still engaging property owners. It doesn't get rid of all of them.
5 versus 7.
Yeah, 5 versus 7 property owners. So there is, you do reduce that number, but it doesn't eliminate the need to acquire right of way.
Just less impactful.
Yeah,
Doesn't really
right.
save a ton of money, a little bit though.
And so this is probably important to just kind of keep in mind as we go into the landscaping. So, again, landscaping park strip, I wanna highlight, this area is kind of half built out. So we're kind of retrofitting and matching. Unfortunately, these older areas that were developed, were before our water efficiency ordinance. So in considering your landscape of the park strips, we now have a water efficient, landscaping ordinance, but the park strip and landscaping that we're installing are in these red areas. We did not consider coming back and kind of redoing all of these park strips with water efficient design. So based on that, just kind of keep in mind, there is a little bit of a checkerboard no matter what we do. We're gonna have a little bit of checkerboard on the landscaping within the park strips.
So I'll just throw right to you, why did we not consider it, and do you have any idea what the cost that would be associated with just ripping that turf out as we're going?
I don't know the cost. We assumed, and there is a little bit of, so these irrigation systems are generally hooked up separately. So there is the ability to disconnect them and have them all set up in the irrigation system, for all of this. But we did not anticipate that, and so, yeah, honestly, it was the cost and looking at what we had today and trying to make the budget work. But if there's direction that would be a goal for the council, we can go and get those costs and bring it back for consideration.
This would depend on the scope of it, right? If it's a few $1,000s, that's one thing. If it's $100,000, it's another thing.
Right.
To me, anyway, it's just like, might as well do it consistent, especially if you can tie it into the one single access for irrigation and things like that. That would be improve efficiencies, but and then we don't have to mow it.
They save maintenance costs in the
Exactly.
future too.
We're tracking that though,
Might not be
because
there.
we may not be saving as much in maintenance.
We're
And
saving
I'd
water.
say, yeah,
It's probably
But I-
as maintenance intensive, if not a little bit.
Yeah,
more.
I'm guessing it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And that,
Replacement of irrigation system.
Just can't imagine spending a budget on that right now.
Right now.
I get it, I agree that I wish we could do it, but just.
Okay, so with that said, we kind of laid out 5 options, but they're really broken into 2 categories. The first 2 are assuming that the city would install and maintain those park strips that are installed. So option A is very similar to what we did on Harriman Main Street, just to the west of here. So it's a alternating stamped concrete with planter beds with bushes and trees. Option B is kind of what the city standard would be, which is down here. Rock mulch all in the park strip, and then at least 50% plant coverage of the ground, and then a tree every 30 feet. So that's our recommendation is, and if you've been down Main Street,
I think it looks good.
we really like the product that came out of Main Street. And talking to our maintenance crews, it's about half as expensive to maintain option A versus option B. So there is some benefits to what we did in Main Street, and honestly, we've gotten a lot of good feedback even from the public on the Main Street landscaping. So those are options A and B, which again, city install and city continually maintain after that. Options C, D, and E would be city install, but property owners maintain their own park strips adjacent to their house. So, option C is we create the space, we leave it empty. And I should say for option C, D, and E, no matter if any of those are chosen, it does include irrigation sleeves that go under the sidewalk. So that if a property owner does want to irrigate the park strip in the future, they don't have to cut up the sidewalk and put a pipe there and then rebuild the sidewalk. We will install, if any of those are chosen, that would be included. So option C is we leave it empty, but we give a stipend or a credit for property owners to do what they want with the park strip as far as landscaping goes. Option D is no stipend, leave it empty. We have those irrigation sleeves if they ever wanna connect to it. And then option E is kind of a hybrid in between those, where we would install the gravel, the rock mulch in the park strip, but we wouldn't do anything else, and we would expect the property owner to maintain or install any future landscaping in that park strip. So, yeah, I can answer any questions about those options.
I was just thinking, if I was a resident, I might just have to get a petition and come in and say, I want the city to take over my park strips too, cause I'm sick of them. Anyway, sorry.
It's a little different because
Public.
it's you know, it's a big wider public street, but you have front yards facing the street, right?
Sure. But there's
Where
a lot of
roads like that, we
places in
don't
that,
have that.
but there are a lot that we do have that in the city. But I think that, I always think it's crazy that you own it and I have to take care of it kind of policy, you know?
Yeah.
Vice versa either way, right?
Which
Yeah, I think
we
it's-
have city ordinance that specifies that if you have a park strip that is adjacent to your home, you're on the hook for maintaining it.
Exactly.
Especially, and with the sidewalk, clearing snow, that goes along with the sidewalk too. So
Cause that was.
there is precedence, but what is desired and is maybe
But
something
this is
else.
also new sidewalk and new park
Yes.
strips.
Yeah, I
Option
mean,
one,
we had the
option A.
same,
Let's
the
go.
same pushback
One A.
with some residents on 70th.
Yeah, option one, option A.
Put all that in, I don't want to.
1A.
Yeah, so
Quiet,
and then
Jerry.
lastly, power overhead. So this is actually 6,000 West today. This is what it looks like. Now, there may need to be relocation as far as pushing it out of the way for sidewalk, but it would stay aerial, and per our franchise agreement with Rocky Mountain Power, if it's in our right of way, they will move it for free. Now, by free, we mean cost-wise. It is a lot of work to actually get them to do it, but
It's that free word.
That's a free word, yeah.
so
You made him think.
So, yeah, that's per our franchise agreement, we've confirmed that that is the case for this project. Or, moving this existing power and communications, this bottom is communications lines underground. It is very expensive, over $1 million to relocate it underground, which would take us over our planned budget as of today.
It was the same conversation we had on Main Street, we wanted to do the same thing, but it was just way too expensive.
And Main Street was complicated with the fact that Rocky Mountain's talking about running another high voltage line. We were gonna put it underground and then they were gonna come back and run a high voltage line down it,
And
so
the same poles, yeah.
we chose to leave it aerial, and if they do that, they'll just put it on those poles, so.
I think if we had lots of money, it'd be great to put it underground.
Yeah, it'd be great.
If
It'd be
Rocky
nice
Mountain
to get
Power
the
wants to
road
do
done.
it, they can do it.
Okay, so this is kind of the cost matrix depending on what you choose. Like was said, we recommend option 1A and not pursuing the underground power just because that would make the project unlikely to be funded. Okay,
Thank you.
we'll move forward.
Sorry, we're not trying to.
No, that's
Trying to
great.
make it
That's
easier.
easy.
And we did find when it goes underground, they have to put boxes, and that can be controversial for whichever neighbor gets
Is
the
that what they
box.
say, stop when you get to yes?
Yes.
Right.
Perfect, okay. Love it. Let's do it. Okay, 2.5, discussion regarding a memorandum of understanding between Harriman City, Teton Ranch, Olympia Land, and Olympia Ranch.
Yeah, there's a slide deck that's really basic, but hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. This is our first public discussion about this, so I'm excited, we're moving this through the process. As you know, we've been working with the group at Olympia and Teton on this MOU. I'm hopeful that we can get some answers from council tonight, kind of what your cap is, on some of these negotiations. So we can go back at this time and then bring it back in December for approval, have a community open house after the holidays in January, and hopefully start moving this project forward. Some of the questions that I have, I've talked to you all about this before, some of their asks, some of these are really basic and not, anything that I'm super concerned about. These are some of the asks that we've talked about, some of them are going to planning commission, I believe, next week, is that correct, Michael?
The MDA amendment.
For Teton. So that will be going to planning commission next Wednesday to reconfigure the Teton lots and to shrink them.
It's down from, what were they, 20,000 plus?
Yeah, they're half acre.
Half
Yeah,
acres,
third.
yeah.
And then I'm still waiting for some information from Ryan about the off-site improvements, so that's not part of this discussion tonight, but it can come back to you with our discussion in December.
Just so that Steve particularly brought that up, we haven't really had a conversation about it, we, in one of our meetings, addressed that, and the number's significantly lower than what we had talked about, so
Really?
they need to quantify that and be able to speak to that.
Yeah. So that's what I'm waiting
Very cool.
for. He was supposedly working with, Brian Hills to get some of those off-site improvement numbers. We just haven't seen them yet, so.
Yeah, so with the way the MDA was set up, it's the percentage of traffic coming from Olympia specifically entering these intersections that we now need to install a signal off-site or install double lefts that we're widening the road, that they would pay the percentage of traffic that is causing this improvement.
Right.
So there were several identified in the original traffic study, but things have changed a lot. And so, yeah, the traffic study would need to be
The traffic
updated from
study's what,
Hills Engineering.
6 years old, so
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing that the developer would like the city to take into consideration is all the funding that they've been able to acquire through the state. So they're quantifying that as well. So the millions of dollars that they're bringing out here to finish 7300 West, to finish those roads, they would like the council to take that
Cause he
into
is over,
consideration.
he's gonna add that up, cause he's over 100 million right now, he's secured from the state, and he's put money into that to get that, he's had to pay a
Sure.
lobbyist, so he
So
wants
he's
that
quantifying
to
that as
be.
well. And I think it's a really good argument.
I think it's
I
fair.
I would agree.
We've talked about this, Olympia wants to increase maximum residential units to 6380 with an additional 50 units on the 7 acres. That was going to be a park, and then pay the city $700,000. I'm assuming the council's okay with those bullet points.
I just wanna talk to you and Todd about the wording on the first refusal.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about that, we've got to get,
Not just,
it's a little bit.
yeah, there's a little bit in the wording I think we need to massage.
Feedback. This is what they're requesting on Walker. I've talked to I've texted Councilman Henderson and Mayor Palmer about the 15 units per acre. He's saying it's going to equate to about 300 units. I don't know how they're gonna fit 300 units on there, but I've been proven wrong before. He's proposing single-family residential bordering existing homes with multifamily throughout the remainder, being townhomes. This will require a general plan amendment, a rezone, and an MDA. It's currently zoned to A143. The north subdivision is R110. He's asking for R210 with an MDA allowing for more.
And I would say for public consumption, nothing's been agreed to.
Right,
These are just
nothing's been agreed
proposals,
to.
these are just thoughts, but
That's what
we
they're
will start.
asking for.
That's what they're
Yeah,
asking
that's their
for.
request.
And even this MOU is not a binding agreement. It's just a pathway forward. So they are asking for a unit per acre number for the Walker property. Right now, they're asking for 15 units per acre.
So I think if we're gonna talk about like, as part of a negotiation, we probably shouldn't do that in open meeting, I propose you do that in a closed. If you're going to like give your negotiators some direction, this is what they've asked
Thank
for,
you.
I would just kind of leave it at, this is what they've asked for, and we can talk about it.
And we'll go to the community.
Which is not surprising from some of the initial feedback we
It's a
got.
negotiation, it's a negotiation.
And they'll be public, cause we're gonna have these public we
We have a public process still.
126, there's really not much to it. It's matching the neighboring, neighborhood. It will require general plan amendment, because right now it's civic, I believe, Stone Civic.
It's where the fire
General
station
plan
was
civic.
going to be.
Yeah. So they're looking at 8 to 10 units depending on how they fit the roads and the cul-de-sac and all the infrastructure in there. So that one's not too bad. Creek Ridge asking for 5 units per acre max, approximately 140 single-family residential lots.
That
And
will
that-
also match.
What if I
Neighborhood?
guess an acre sounded like a lot?
Yes.
And
One time.
I think that's all I wanted to go over unless you had questions as you read through the MOU. And some of the other areas.
The caveat on MOU, it's not a binding contract.
It's not binding,
So it just allows us to move forward and it starts to allow the public to be in the conversation too.
Yeah, and given the timeline on this MOU, we wanted to get it in front of the public, so that way, when we start bringing these forward, and there's, we've clearly been working on it, that it's not more of a, like, we were never aware of this type of thing.
Yeah, finished product, yeah.
And he needs to start, and Ryan needs to start having negotiations with his landowners too, with Richmond specifically, so that's why he needs this in place
Right.
now. So.
To help with that stuff, yeah.
6400 West is another big ask. It's not, I don't believe it's part of the MOU. I don't remember seeing
I don't think so.
that, but that's a priority for him. And it's on our.
Oh, that's the reimbursement portion,
capital
right?
That last section.
It is in there.
It's a couple
It's-
phases and a bridge.
And it is in the,
But the county's paying for the bridge.
it's in the bond and the plan that we adopted with this budget, so the funding will be there. A lot of it's a question of timing and who's gonna do it, so we
got funding for the bridge is funded.
correct, the county is.
Still needs to go to
As
the
a
county
might
for
be
final
we were
approval,
gonna
but
get
it's in the
Tentative.
mayor's budget.
Yeah,
it's in the proposed.
Yes.
Any other concerns about this one?
No, I think this is in line with, the things we'd outlined before. There's no real surprises in here or anything, so.
I'm planning on, planning or community development, holding some open houses after Christmas. We don't wanna do this during the holidays,
Yeah.
so we'll start moving those forward in January. I know that you wanted to have some neighborhood meetings on your
I've
own.
had a couple of conversations with concerned neighbors over there.
Sure. Yeah, so we're just trying to get things set forward, and kudos to Todd for putting this together and bringing this idea to us, to have an MOU with all the parties. As far as, land reserve, we're still working through some stuff, so.
They'll have a separate MOU.
Yeah.
with
Right.
land.
And to articulate, these are talking points about potential outcomes
Yeah.
that would facilitate the creation of a massive recreational soccer field complex. Athletic complex, right, for all kinds of athletic competitions, but to be a, really crown jewel kind
An
of
anchor to
development out
bring
here, yeah.
economic activity.
Right, as directed by the economic studies we've had, right? And so I think we need to understand that people are seeing all these things, what's going on with all these different land. This is all part of the process of achieving that big goal.
Well, and to add to that, we have to do, cause they just renewed ZAP, like the voters just, re-approved ZAP. But to qualify for that for a regional facility, we have to get to a certain acreage, and so that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to do some land swaps and trading of density and move to acquire.
Consolidate the
Well, it
land
needs
in a
to
way that, yeah.
Cause we couldn't,
In
the
order-
county wouldn't come in and help if we had 5 acres, 6 acres, that they just wouldn't, that wouldn't be considered a regional, we could not get ZAP funding. So this helps bring in outside funding, this is the whole goal why we're going in this direction.
Yeah, and 5 acres here, 10 acres will be the regional draw we need for commercial.
100%.
anyway.
And because of this, and we have interest in other stuff coming along with this, hotels, which helps.
Just the fact that the right people are talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yep.
We're already getting interested, commercial interest in hotels
Those are big tax
specifically.
dollars, big contributors to tax dollars, yeah.
That helps in that conversation we had with the police department and every other thing.
And every other thing, yeah.
And the
Well,
Main
maybe
Street,
we might
trying to
need
budget
to-
that and everything else.
Help. When you add hotels, they're definitely an impact to law enforcement.
Ran on our radar. They're gonna be high
Only
end
if they have a
hotels.
stove.
Depends on the.
Well, it still
High-end
counts for
hotels.
sure.
Location and
They have hourly rates.
Actually, it really
Those are not the ones we want.
Okay, so you're good, we got,
Yeah.
you good?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like, look to a motion to move 2.6 to another meeting, are you okay with that?
Yeah,
I wanna
actually,
have
as
a
long
big
as you,
discussion. I don't wanna go
because
rush.
this is actually a little, when I first put this on there, November was actually going to be a light meeting. So I thought we'd have time and then it got away from us, so yeah, it might be January, cause I think our December meeting's gonna be.
Do I need a motion to move that off the agenda?
I think we just
Okay, we'll just move that.
continue it.
Continue.
We'll do it another day.
Great.
That would tell them to come back, I mean, other than closed.
You want to come back?
Other than closed. Okay, I'll look for a motion to. You wanna try to get any closed items? Let's just, let's
No,
ten,
I
let's
don't
just-
think so.
Can we talk it, can we
Yeah.
talk property
Yeah.
on the one,
We
just a
could.
little bit, that'd be good for us to
Right
do.
now or
Yeah, right now.
Closed,
Well, we can do it in close, I don't know if do you wanna try?
Go into closed right now.
Yeah, is that what you're asking, Jared? I mean, we could.
I don't think it won't take that long, but that would
On
give
that
us,
one item?
that would give
Yeah.
us some direction going into next month.
Yeah, just make a
Okay.
motion with that one item.
Well, we're
And I
gonna
want
have a
Jared to make
closed
the motion.
session later.
So we'll have to do it one.
Yeah, but
Tonight.
there's-
Yeah.
Quick one.
Oh, we
Yeah,
can, we can just do it later.
Just do it
Do
with
it all
the other ones,
together.
yeah, let's
Okay.
just do it all
You're
together.
already gonna
Okay.
have
4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Okay. They said we weren't happy.
oh,
They want to go back to work.
no, not, Jared, come on, man.
Okay, look for a motion to.
Can't blame the guy for shopping.
Adjourn, work meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.